Texas mom Eliana Bagani was supposed to meet a friend for breakfast last week on Wednesday, but she didn't show up to that breakfast. And when that friend couldn't get in touch with her, and then she learned that Eliana's mom couldn't get in touch with her either, they got nervous and they called police. And that call led to what sounds like a chilling exchange between officers and the man you see here with Eliana, her husband of 7+ years, Jake Bagani. Now, Eliana and Jake, they're also parents. They have 2 young boys, ages 2 and 5, which is just heartbreaking. And just 3 days before Eliana's death, this is what Jake posted on his Facebook page, a montage video showing what seems like a picture-perfect family all together celebrating one of their boys' birthdays. And as you look at this post, there are pictures of Eliana in the montage and pictures of Eliana and Jacob together. And things on the surface seemed fine. On July 22nd, he also posted another montage video with pictures of Eliana. It's a montage of images of them together over the years as this family together. Now, it's never easy to understand how someone who does appear to be so loving could allegedly have the ability to do what Texas police say that Jake did. Now, Plano, Texas is where all of this takes place. It's a suburb of Dallas. And Plano appears to have been a new home for the Bagani family. We found in April, Eliana posted to a Plano neighborhood group saying, quote, "Hi all, we're excited to share that our family is moving from Orlando, Florida to Dallas due to my husband's job. I'm currently a realtor in Florida and will eventually continue my career in Texas as well. We have 2 sweet boys, 4 years and 18 months, and we'd love to connect with other families in the area. Feel free to text me. I'd be happy to meet new friends and start building our community in Dallas." Now, it appears that Jake is from Oregon originally, and then he started dating Eliana in 2019. His social media shows him actually going Facebook official with someone in February of that year. Then shortly after, these two started posting pictures with one another. They end up getting married. They end up having these 2 young children, and life seems great. It was just in November of last year, Eliana posted, quote, "I love you, Jake Bagani. Thank you for these 7 years together. God has blessed our story, our love, and the beautiful family we've built, especially our children who make our lives better. Here's to us, to his plans, and to many more years together." Now, even though Jake had posted that beautiful family montage just days before he allegedly killed Eliana, things were not as picture perfect as they seemed. The 2 of them were reportedly going through a divorce. Now, it's unclear what the circumstances are surrounding them splitting up, but a friend told police that Eliana and Jake were estranged from one another. And you go back to that day, August 12th, Eliana had told that friend that before they were going to meet up for breakfast, she was going to go pick up her 2 children, just 2 and 5 years old, from an apartment where Jake was apparently living. It's this luxury apartment complex on Charles Place in Plano, Texas. Now, Eliana says that she was going to meet this friend for breakfast at 8:30, and she had shared her location with that friend. And she said that this pickup process, it shouldn't take more than 10 to 15 minutes. But that friend, when Eliana didn't show up for breakfast, she looks at her phone, she looks at Eliana's location, and she can see that it's not moving from that apartment complex where she went to pick up her children. She apparently then gets in touch with Eliana's mom, who says she can't get in touch with her daughter either. Now, there's more context that we're learning, not just that this was a couple that was going through the process of divorce. For as nice a guy as Jake seems in pictures and on social media, well, according to police, quote, "Witness 1, which is the friend, advised there were concerns regarding Jake Bagani being violent in the past." Now, this is where we start to get a different picture of Jake Bagani. Police say they were called for a welfare check at Jake's apartment. They knock on the door and Jake answers. This is around 10:23 in the morning. Police say they asked Jake where his wife is, and quote, he advised that she had been there earlier in the day, but that he didn't know where she was currently. Jake Pagani advised they were going through a divorce and she came by to pick up a kid, but the kid wasn't feeling well. Now, listen, at that point, if you're a police officer in Plano, Texas, that is a suspect story considering what you've been told about this couple, the fact they were going through a divorce, and Eliana's friend accusing Jake of being violent in the past. But one of the officers reportedly also noticed something that would be very key to breaking this investigation wide open. Per authorities, the officer discovered, quote, a large apparent wet spot on Jake Pagani's shirt. And the officer then asks Jake about that wet spot, and Jake said he had been cleaning. Again, that is a suspect answer. Police then asked Jake if they could check out the garage. And Jake said yes. This is one of those apartment units, it seems, where you have the apartment up top, then you go downstairs into a garage where you keep your vehicles. Now, beyond saying that he had seen Eliana earlier in the day, Jake at that point did not have much more to add. So police apparently check out the garage. They see that Jake's car's in there, and then they head back to their squad car. All of this, I'm sure for the officers, like it just sounded sketchy. It sounded suspicious. Something must be going on here. And I do hope that one day we'll be able to get the body cam of this incident to see it for ourselves. But in Texas, often that will come after a case concludes. Now, the officers, they get back to their squad car. And when they get there, there is a note waiting for them related to this call that they're on. And it's the kind of note that would send a chill down your spine. That note read, quote, I believe someone has been harmed or killed. Police say that Jake Pagani's own mom called law enforcement from out of state as these officers apparently were inside with Jake. And she says that she had just spoken with her son before the officers arrived at the apartment. Jake allegedly told his mom, quote, I have something to tell you. She's dead. We got in a fight and she's dead. That changes everything for police. After they get this new information, they go back inside and they put Jake in handcuffs. And this is what we know about the alleged exchange they have with Jake inside the apartment. He apparently said, why are you doing this to the officers? And the officers had told him, you're detained. Is your wife there? You're not under arrest. Is she there? And then when officers asked Jake why he would tell his mom that Eliana was dead, he reportedly said, quote, how would you know this kind of stuff? Now, as police are questioning Jake, they turn their attention once again to that wet spot that was on his shirt because it appears to have dried. And now there was a reddish brown stain there. And police believe that is blood. They say at that point they had enough probable cause to search his apartment for Eliana. Now, it's important to note, as this exchange is going on and police are trying to figure out what happened to Eliana and if she's been hurt, the couple's 2- and 5-year-old children are reportedly in the apartment. Now, police have said it is unclear what those children saw or what they may have experienced in the apartment that morning. But with Jake detained, police then go back to the garage. They say they go to Jake's car and they open the trunk. And they say inside the trunk were the remains of a woman. And they say that it was the body of Eliana Pagani. Her clothing appeared to have blood on it, according to the arrest affidavit that we have. They also note she had, quote, significant damage to her face and head and various bruises on her body that appeared to be from an alleged violent confrontation. Police say the children were removed from the home. They also say they found a large amount of blood spatter inside the apartment. Jake was arrested. He is charged with abuse of a corpse and murder in the first degree. And right now, he is being held in the Collin County Jail in Texas without bond. And the smiles that we've seen of him in those countless family pictures online, now replaced with the cold, lifeless stare of an accused killer in a mugshot. Now, there are still a lot of questions that have to be answered in this investigation. We do not know what the official cause of death is for Eliana Bagani, even though police have described visual signs of trauma on her body in court records. What we do know about her is that she was a mom and she appeared to truly care for her children. She worked hard in her career. She made sacrifices for her family, like moving across the country for her husband's job. And now that husband, who made it seem like he truly cared for his family, is behind bars and may never be a free person again. Join us now to talk about this case is law enforcement instructor Sonny Slaughter. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. It just, going through the police document that we have, kind of laying out the narrative from the eyes of the officers. And there's so much to talk about, from, of course, focusing on the victim, Eliana Bagani, in this story. But I just think of these officers. You get a welfare check. And I feel like 95% of those might just be what you do, throughout the day as a police officer. But then you get this one, and suddenly something just doesn't seem right. And it just snowballs into something that I'm sure they couldn't have anticipated. Based on what you read going through that document as a law enforcement instructor, what stood out to you about how police handled this?
I think they did an excellent, and I do mean excellent job. Like you said, law enforcement, for the most part, they get these calls regularly. It's a part of what they do, the welfare checks going out, just to make sure that someone is okay. But then when I read the documents, when I read the affidavit and the level of detail that the officer put in uh, his affidavit, I felt him. I felt his words, his presence, and I felt how much it probably felt to him, even though I wasn't there. This was very detailed, very good writing, very specific, and you could feel the presence of him walking, them walking in and asking questions. And one critical part that you said, something didn't feel right. And that's what they immediately felt. And you can get that from the language in the document when he opens the door and they see the stain.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like looking at a person in their eyes and going straight to that stain and saying, something feels off. And that's what they felt.
Yeah, I found an interesting thing too, and you might be able to explain this better, because in the affidavit that you read through it, so they have this interaction with them, and it's like, first off, they were told going in that there's some sort of a violent history. There's divorce that's potentially, I don't know if they had filed, but they were considered estranged at the time. Seemed like things were over. And then they go back to their cruiser, where I'm sure they were like, that was weird. But then it's like there's a note for them. And is that like on the screen where they were? Like, and the note says that the mom had allegedly called, said that she spoke to her son, and her son said that Eliana Bagani was dead. And I just found it interesting where, I'm sure they have the, I don't know if like walkie-talkie is not the term, but IFB or whatever they're using, where that could have gone over dispatch of like, but it isn't. It like seemed like the way that information was conveyed to the officers was in a safe way where they could understand like what they're dealing with, to then go back in and then, be not just doing a welfare check, but now they're concerned about whether or not this woman had been murdered.
Right. So domestic violence calls, even though this was not technically a domestic violence call, this was a welfare call. Domestic violence calls are the most dangerous calls that law enforcement go to every single day. Hands down, nothing else more dangerous than those calls, which is why they're often given a lot of detail. This came through as a welfare call initially. And their radios on their shoulders, on their belts, or wherever they have them clipped to, is what you were talking about, to get ongoing information. But when they initially got the call, it was just for the welfare. But when they got back to that cruiser and they saw the additional details about the violence and about the call, and that there was an incident, it changed they already had that this seems strange. And now they had more confirmation that it was strange, it was potentially dangerous for them, and that someone was in danger. So all of that gives them a different stance on how they go back. But the fact that they actually went to the cruiser and they were in there first of all, it was safety. A cruiser where they could pull off sign of safety, because a lot of times in these incidents, things can go violent really quickly. And they were in their car, but having to get back out puts them at another level of danger. So that heightens how they're going to respond, react, and how they're going to engage. And then the staying made potential more sense.
Yeah, and the one question I did have was with, the kids are in the house, and they don't have, and, it's kind of this question of
Mhm.
probable cause. We read the document with benefit of hindsight, knowing what the charges are and how they got to this point. But
Right.
it's like you go back to the moment where they go to the cruiser, and it's like, could more have been done in that moment where it's like something doesn't feel right, but the kids are still there, and then they go back to the cruiser where it's like you worry for the kids' safety, especially with what we know he's accused of. But then it's like, as you're reading that, you have to understand, like, for these officers, they have no idea what's going on, and
Right.
they're kind of learning as they go. What is the level of because they do list out, like, the point that they feel like that there was probable cause, because you had what the mom had apparently said and that information came in. You have the stain that didn't feel right. But how does it get to that point of probable cause, especially in a domestic situation where at that point they didn't know if Eliana had driven off somewhere, if, like, she was upset over the divorce and she left? That's clearly not what police say happened. But how you handle those situations as a police officer, it feels so difficult because you don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. You have to make the right decision and you have to follow the law, where it's like, if there's no probable cause that something happened, it's not like you could just take the kids out of the house.
Exactly. And the pressure is there, but like you said, you cannot break the law in order to do something, because he gave them an explanation. He said the kids didn't feel well, so she left the children at the house. So you can't just automatically say, well, let me see the kids, because that's not necessarily what you can get a probable cause warrant for, because there were no necessary red flags that indicated true danger at the time until they came back the second time. But they still had to follow a process. Remember, even though you think they didn't see the children, they didn't hear the children, they didn't the stain on the shirt and the mom being missing still was not enough, except with the added layer coming back the second time, where his mother, not her mother, his mother called in and said that her son said she was dead. Now, this is still hearsay, so remember, they still have to follow the law, they still have to ask questions, but they did not say he was under arrest. Remember, they used the right language, the right process. You're being detained. That was very clear in there. They said you're being detained, which means detained and arrest, not the same thing. And he had also allowed them, prior to going back to the cruiser, the opportunity to go to the garage and to look in there. So, although his behavior seemed weird, it seemed off, it wasn't enough, because he allowed them to do everything that they asked him to do, which didn't it raised some suspicion, but not enough for this to be like, okay, so we're just going to go in and get the kid. So they really acted in their safety and in the safety and interest of the children, because they didn't know where the children were,
Right. Well, and
and
I,
they
I
had to
just
be careful.
I just think of Jake Bagani's mom too. And,
Yes.
this isn't a situation where I'm sure she wants a pat on the back or anything. No parent would ever want to be in the situation that she was in, where
Right.
your child has called and has said that they potentially, it's not, he said that, he said there was a fight and that she's dead. And I feel like there's been cases where you see a parent that's not going to turn their kid in. But in this case, she did the right thing according to law enforcement, calling and to say, hey, this is what my son told me, which,
Yeah.
you know, just I there's just I mean it's just hard to think of, like, as a parent, how difficult that phone call would be, and there just should be, you know, credit given to her that she had to make
Absolutely.
what is an impossible decision to actually call, but it's the right decision in that situation for sure.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Because what about if her son was just saying something and it wasn't true, and then she called and said this what her son said, and then nothing, then none of this was true. However, she was not only thinking about what her son said, she was thinking about her grandchildren. And most often, we know who our children are. We know them, we know their behaviors, and even though we don't think that they might kill somebody, we also sometimes there had been violence indicated in the relationship. She was probably aware and that he could have done something, because why would he call her and say that? So she did the right thing. I think we should absolutely give her credit for doing that, and probably hold her hand at the same time, because this is still her son. This is still her child. And he has done something so heinous to a daughter in law
Right.
that gave birth to her grandchildren. So the dynamics here, it's just like law enforcement dynamics are unique. The dynamics of the alleged murderer's mother intervening on behalf, that is unique. And then the fact that law enforcement were able to get access to probable cause warrant to get the children and unfortunately find their mother's body. He had to be doing a lot in a very short period of time. Remember, because she was going to meet, was it her mom or someone
It
for
was a
breakfast?
friend in
Yeah.
Dallas at like 8:30 in the morning, and then the call to
Yes.
police is in around 10:20, which is, you know, again, like, you know, to just think, you know, and the other part of it too is like this stain, like the story of the stain and the way the
Yes.
author writes it is like the shirt has, you know, if it's, you know, say, and in this case, they allege that he had blood on his shirt. He probably tried to wipe it off with water
Mhm.
of some kind. So the shirt's wet when police arrive, but it's dried when they come back. And
I
it's,
know.
um, you know, and police are not hired to write reports well. You know, it's like, I mean, some of them are very bland
Yeah.
to read, but this one, the detail is just something that, like, you just, to your point, like, you just kind of feel it, like, as you're going
Yes.
through.
Yeah.
You know, divorce makes, you know, I've fortunately never been through one, but we see in so many cases, divorce makes people do crazy things.
Yes.
Relationships, love, it makes people do horrific things. And if you watch Law and Crime or Court TV, like, sadly, we
Yes.
see it all too often. But I still am just, for as surface level as social media can be, how someone can post pictures happy, smiling, not really, you know, to, from what I've found, like maybe some speeding tickets, never really a criminal record.
Yeah.
And yet to allegedly kill the mother of your children and then be able to keep some sort of stiff upper lip, where you might have been acting weird to police, but this was someone who in the moment, it just, I was able, at least at that point, police left. Like, they didn't feel like they had probable cause for anything, like,
Mhm.
because of the way he was acting. We don't have the body cam at this point, but it's just, it just gives you an idea of like the people that law enforcement have to come in contact with, where like something's wrong with this person.
Yeah.
And it just blows my mind that it can be the same person that you see in these pictures.
And you know, I was thinking as I was waiting for you and I to have this conversation, I have been divorced. I've been married twice. I have been divorced. But the one thing that I've always said, I don't want anyone to love me enough that they can kill me. I don't want that kind of love. I have never been in that kind of love. Like I get along great with my first husband. The second one is dead. I didn't kill him, but
Sorry.
but the level of social media has a way of falsifying or putting a I don't know, a shield over the truth sometimes of people's lives, where you think everything is so perfect, this person is so great, and because when we are transparent, social media does the other thing. When you are transparent and you talk about who you are really, and like you and I were saying, these cases hurt me so deeply. I'm a mom, I'm a grandmother, and I don't know any of the hosts like yourselves, the experts that come on, where we don't feel these cases, where they don't matter. And then sometimes we get attacked a lot by our views that we are taking professionally for one lens or another from people. They act like we don't care. And I think that's the thing that social media does that harms us as a society. It doesn't allow people to be their authentic selves so we can see, like, where, or have more understanding about how did he go from loving her, having two children, to allegedly murdering her in the home or near the home with their children, 2 and 5, near them. That is horrific and heinous. Like, how do you cut off that switch? And I don't want to hear that people snap or that he snapped in this way, because what made him snap when they also had this history of violence, which is one of the reasons why they were estranged. Now she could have been they could have had dual violence where she was violent and he was violent and they couldn't be together. But the murder in the home with the 2 babies, and he was quite calm when he came up with the fact that the children
and that
were
was
safe.
the thing. That was the thing, was like the calmness of it, where
Yeah.
you're still able to lie allegedly to police.
Yes.
And I just, these stories, it kind of comes back to this question, because it's like, here's, she did the right thing, and apparently like sharing her location with a friend, saying, hey, this is going to take 10 to 15 minutes. If it's anything more, I'll see you after. I don't know if it was like, hey, if you don't hear from me in an hour, call police. But it was like, it just, these cases where, I don't think she suspected that it was going to go like this, like that day. And it's like, how do you protect people without understanding what's going to happen in the future in these so emotionally charged situations? And I don't know Jake Pagani. I don't know. We don't know at this point, like, what that history of violence actually looks like, what led to the divorce. That very well could have been it, like the crux of it. But it's just still like, you just ask yourself, like, how can we protect people who are in these custody exchanges? In especially in this one, where it's like, it's not like it doesn't seem like they had filed for divorce. So it's like an estrangement, and it's kind of this unofficial capacity where it's like police don't really have anything to go off of unless you have the documentation.
Well, the fact that the friend called so quickly and she didn't show up meant there was some kind of,
She
maybe
needs some.
not a coordinated plan in place, but she felt some level of fear, and those around her understood what that was. Enough people knew that if I don't show up, then you need to send someone. So it might not have been a formal plan, but she had some things in place that indicated her level of fear or anxiety, and other people read that, they understood it, they knew it, they believed her, and they acted upon it quickly enough for this not to be some long drawn out missing persons case. And I think we when people say things like, I'm afraid of this person, I think we need to hear them. We need to listen to what they're saying, and then go back in our memory to see if there's anything that we potentially recognize from this. Because sometimes, we always think abuse and violence is physical, but it can be emotional and psychological and financial. So if the person that's ever said, like, I don't have access to money and I can't do this, that can be abusive and controlling and not necessarily physical violence. So, like you said, we don't know what this was that led them to being estranged, but it was enough for whoever she was going to meet for her to recognize that there was a problem and she didn't show up, and to make the call right away for the welfare check. And it's also good that law enforcement received it and then went immediately. I'm not saying in 5 minutes, but they did not hesitate and they went to check, because more and more people are having incidents like this. Incidents not don't always lead to murder, but we are seeing violence and murder happening more and more when it comes to these issues with children and custody. And it's not always the men harming the women. We have
No,
cases
no.
where women against men, and we're covering them on Law and Crime, we're covering them on Court TV, where women have plotted murders. These are difficult days, and these are different times, and we really have to be open, be mindful, and be aware. And I think that's what every time I talk to you, I feel like when we have these conversations, we might not have all of the answers for the public. We might not know all of the things for everyone to do, but we give them at least a nugget enough for them to feed off of, to pay attention close to, and if it's not them, to recognize it in someone else. And I think that's what Law and Crime, Court TV, and shows like this, that's what we do for the public, because the silence of violence is far too loud these days, and we are coming into contact with individuals where this is the murder case because somebody missed just the incidents that kept happening.
Yeah, and it's hard, and I think these cases, you hope by telling them and for people seeing stories like this, maybe if they're in that situation, or they have a friend who they're concerned about, that they, sadly through, a life lost and a beautiful life, it seems that, Anna Begani had, that it can save somebody else.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens next. In this case, Jake Begani is being held without bond. We'll see what his defense potentially could be. Of course, everybody deserves a defense. He's innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely.
We'll see what happens next. Sonny Slaughter, law enforcement instructor. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, before we go, I do want to put some important information up on the screen here. This is the Domestic Violence Hotline. It is staffed multiple hours a day, and it can help you if you're in trouble, if you know someone who's in trouble. It is for people who speak multiple languages, and it is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The number, 800-799-7233. You can also text START to 88788, or you can go online and visit thehotline.org. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.